Welcome, my grief-curious friends. Suppose you've stumbled upon this anonymous grief podcast. Purposely or accidentally, either way, we are happy you are here with us. I'm your host, Andie, and today we're talking about something that often sneaks up on us like an X out of nowhere: the effects of physical grief. Yep, we're diving deep into the ways our bodies throw full-blown tantrums when life slaps us with loss, transitions, change, and, well, just being human. Think physical attributes of menopause, unspoken and stigmatized mental health struggles, chronic illness, disabilities, especially the hidden ones. We are addressing the whole inconvenient events that come with physical grief. So if you've ever felt like you are uncomfortable and awkward in your own body, then this conversation is here for you. Why can't my body do what I need it to do when I need it to be done? There is a significant conversation that needs to be addressed regarding who you are while occupying this space during these moments and how society can alleviate the barriers and burdens that people face in these times. Again, we extend a warm welcome to our fellow grief comrades to episode 6, affectionately called The Body Keeps the Grief, an homage to Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. In this episode, we are talking about physical attributes and all the ways in which grief impacts us. As your host and a local registered social worker, I feel obligated to introduce our listeners to my co-host to help spread the myriad of copious information in today's segment. As our episode traditions continue on Grief Anatomy, joining me today is my anonymous collaborator, a fellow academic and curious mind, here to help unpack and explore the layers upon layers in this episode. Welcome to episode 6, dear colleague. Thank you for being here.
Thank you kindly for inviting me back. I must be doing something right if I keep getting the call back.
Yes, of course. It has nothing to do with no other volunteers available at this time. Don't worry. We love you.
Ha ha ha. Okay. Well, on that note, I'm going to jump right in as your most wanted and most liked candidate. Okay, so what if I told you grief is not just about what we've lost in the past, but what we're avoiding in the present? Today is a good day to get into some serious stuff regarding the physical self in the grief arena. Doing things a little cart before the horse is talking about treatment before assessment. Gestalt therapy is one place to start. It is the therapy that gently taps your shoulder and says, "Feel that, right now, because I'm not going anywhere anytime soon."
Oh yeah, Gestalt therapy is a great one to cover first. It is a humanistic approach that focuses on awareness, the present moment, and integration of the whole self, mind, body, emotions. It's less, let's fix you, and more, let's meet you where you actually are. It begs reflection and asking yourself, how has the here and now approach helped in moments of my overwhelming grief? Gestalt is big on embodiment and asks what happens when you name the physical sensations of grief in real time. And have you ever spoken to a part of yourself in the empty chair? What came up for you in those moments?
During the application and overview of Gestalt therapy techniques, there is one technique called Direct Me. It is a philosophy that breaks down into the D being, dream work, the I being, I take responsibility. The R is correlated to role-playing, while the E is the empty chair technique. The C in Direct Me is confrontation, while the T represents techniques like loosening and integrating approaches. The M stands for making the rounds, taking the time to acknowledge a stance and position, while the E stands for enactment exaggeration. The Gestalt's Direct Me approach and technique is a great way to activate remembering skills, facing the avoidance protocols of the mind and body, and looking directly at the grief at hand.
As an engagement practice, I'm going to ask our listeners, have you ever spoken to a part of yourself in the empty chair? And what came up for you? Gestalt is quite effective in the empty chair technique. This is where you would have yourself or a guest talk to someone they've lost or a part of themselves they've disowned, e.g., the version of me that existed before they died.
Yes, by also completing a present-centered check-in while asking yourself or them, what are you noticing in your body right now as you talk about this? Simultaneously, invite the breath in, center yourself in stillness and silence as you assess the question.
As an example, I am going to verbally give you a reference point for Gestalt's theory for future thought, consideration, or personal practice. Please research this technique before you practice it, as it may not be the best fit for you at this time. And a quick disclaimer, I am not a trained therapist in this particular technique myself. This is purely for information, research, and educational tools for the toolbox.
This first example of Gestalt's theory is called grieving a parent while parenting. So a single mom is grieving her mother's death while raising her own child. She dissociates frequently and avoids photos or talking about her mom so as to avoid emotional triggers in depth that she is not ready to explore. The application of this technique is called two-chair dialogue. One chair is the strong parent and the other is the grieving daughter. Let them speak from both perspectives to these empty chairs. Explore the inner conflict. Guilt and longing not yet been explored is the aim of Gestalt's theory and approach.
The second example involves anticipatory grief in caregiving. In this example, a man caring for his terminally ill partner avoids acknowledging the inevitable. He numbs out with chores and logistics, never confronting what is an inevitable outcome for their partner. The Gestalt technique invites body scan awareness plus naming the resistance. This is an invitation for them to notice physical tension that lies in the body. Ask them where they are holding the grief. What would that tension say if it had a voice?
Moving on quickly, we wanted to address the types of grievers out there. There are two main types of grievers. One is the instrumental griever, who focuses more on thinking, doing, rather than feeling. They are likely to share their grief out loud, asking questions, by keeping busy and focusing on activities. The second is intuitive grievers, who share their emotions and feelings with others. They can be very expressive and need to explore their feelings in order to progress through their pain and move towards healing.
We wanted to discuss ways in which you can support an instrumental griever by providing projects of interest to keep them busy and distracted. Examples of this might be housework, staining a deck, watching multiple seasons of a show, training for an event like a marathon, or organizing random acts of kindness for neighbors. The key is to remember that instrumental grievers recognize and accept that keeping busy is a good way of processing grief and loss for them.
Now, how you can support an intuitive griever is as follows. Listening without trying to fix anything is key. Also, validate any emotions or thoughts they may share. Be understanding. Have somewhere in the community where people can express themselves, like a grief tree. Find a support group where they can connect with others going through a similar journey after giving consent.
Once you can accurately see what kind of griever you may be sitting with, additionally, finding out their love languages can be highly enlightening and can create attachments that have the person feeling connected and safe and secure to share in their grief journey. Have you heard of the 5 love languages? Coined by Dr. Gary Chapman, these are the ways people give and receive love. And no, sarcasm is not one of them, though we see it all the time.
So let's break the love languages down with examples that won't make your eyes roll completely back into your head. The first one, words of affirmation, translates to verbal appreciation equals emotional foreplay. Examples to fulfill it: tell them they're brilliant, beautiful, or that their lasagna was better than Nona's. Send a midday text: thinking of you. Also, I miss your face and your coffee. Leave sticky notes around the house. You rock. I believe in you. All correlate to words of affirmation in the love language.
The second is acts of service, the quick translation. Actions speak louder than "I love you," murmured while scrolling Instagram. Examples to fulfill it: make them coffee before they ask. Do the dishes without announcing it like you just won the Nobel Peace Prize? Or maybe tackle that errand they've been dreading?
The third of Dr. Gary Chapman's love languages is receiving gifts. This loosely translates to it's not materialism, it's thoughtfulness, with wrapping paper. Examples to fulfill it: pick up their favorite snack on the way home, buy flowers, food, or all of the above. The classic surprise them with a little just because gift, like that book they said they wanted months ago. Yes, that specific one.
Dr. Gary Chapman's 4th love language is quality time. Our quick New Age translation is put down the phone. No, seriously, put down your phone. Examples we suggest to fulfill it: schedule a screen-free walk where you actually talk, and not just about what to watch later. Perhaps cook dinner together, even if one of you thinks boiling water is a high-skill activity. Try a hobby you both hate or love just to bond over it. Hello, knitting?
Love language number 5 is physical touch. Our translation, a consensual hug, holding hands, cuddling, a massage, etc. At its core, this love language is about connection through safe, consensual physical closeness. For individuals who resonate with this language, nonverbal gestures like a hug, holding hands, or a gentle touch on the shoulder can communicate love more deeply than words. Examples we suggest that fulfill it: hold hands during walks or conversations to foster connection and presence. Even a simple touch can offer reassurance and grounding. Cuddle or sit close during moments of rest or reflection to provide comfort, reduce stress, and build intimacy. Offer a gentle massage after a long day. This kind of nurturing contact can be both restorative and emotionally supportive. Lean into playful gestures like a spontaneous dance in the kitchen. These lighthearted moments build connection through shared joy.
We want to stress this important note, especially about physical touch. Always ensure that physical touch is mutual, welcome, and attuned to the comfort and boundaries of the person receiving it. Physical affection should never be assumed. Consent and communication are key.
So whether your love language is being told you're the best thing since sourdough or having someone take your car for an oil change, remember, we don't all speak love the same way, and we may hold more than one at a time. But if we try to learn each other's dialect, we might just stop yelling, "You never listen to me," and start saying, "I feel seen." That's the hope anyway.
Understanding how we give and receive love isn't complete without also exploring why we seek it the way we do. That's where attachment theory comes in. Attachment theory, originally developed by John Bowlby and expanded by Mary Ainsworth, explains how our early relationships with caregivers shape our expectations and behaviors in adult relationships. It identifies 4 primary attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful avoidant, disorganized. When we pair this with the 5 love languages, words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and receiving gifts, we gain a deeper understanding of why certain expressions of love feel more validating, soothing, or triggering, depending on our attachment style.
Attachment styles and love language tendencies. Here's how the dots connect. Secure attachment, likely love languages. All 5 may be well received. Secure individuals tend to both express and receive love fluidly. The quick look at relational behavior in secure attachments means being comfortable with intimacy and autonomy. They can ask for what they need without fear and are usually receptive to others' love languages. Physical grief in the body, think exhaustion, heaviness in the chest, some crying, but it doesn't feel like the world is collapsing, just raining a bit inside.
Anxious attachment, likely love languages. Words of affirmation and physical touch often feel most regulating. The relational behavior may crave constant reassurance, leading to a preference for frequent validation through touch or verbal affirmation. Lack of consistent love language expression may be perceived as abandonment. This person clings like grief is a lifeboat, often born from inconsistent caregiving. "I love you, go away, come back, not like that." Anxious attachers are hyper-aware of loss and terrified of abandonment. In grief, they may feel like the person they lost took oxygen, validation, and their will to live with them. They might obsess over what they could have done differently, even if they were literally just standing there. Anxious attachment and physical grief in the body may look like a racing heart, a tight chest, insomnia, and that pit in the stomach feeling like they just sent a risky text and saw the bubble disappear.
Avoidant attachments, likely love languages, acts of service or receiving gifts, tangible, less emotionally vulnerable expressions of care. The relational behavior correlated with avoidance. They may struggle with physical closeness or verbal affection. These individuals often express love in practical ways even if they avoid overt emotional displays. This person learned early on that emotions equal vulnerability and vulnerability equals danger, so they bottle their grief like it's limited edition kombucha. Feelings: never met her, don't know her, next. Avoidant attachments in grief. They may seem totally okay right after a loss, but it's a trap. They're grieving from a safe emotional distance, usually via spreadsheets, sarcasm, or sudden interest in DIY projects. With avoidance and physical grief in the body, it may look like tension headaches, back pain, and a clenched jaw you could crack walnuts with. Repression has a physical cost, baby.
Fearful avoidant, disorganized. Attachment. The likely love languages, often inconsistent or conflicted, may desire physical touch and words of affirmation, but fear or push away closeness. The relational behavior, torn between wanting intimacy and fearing it. They may misinterpret loving gestures or become overwhelmed by emotional intensity. Disorganized attachment may look like, I want you close, but also I'm terrified. Hug me. No, wait, don't. Born from trauma or chaotic caregiving, this style is a blend of anxious and avoidant. It's a push-pull dance of help me, but don't look at me. In grief, these folks may experience grief as unsafe. They want connection, but fear it. They may lash out, isolate, cling, or all three, sometimes within the same hour. Physical grief in the body, panic, dissociation, chronic fatigue, and other stress-activated chaos. Think, I blacked out while folding laundry and woke up in the fetal position with one sock on.
Let's talk about why this matters in relationships. Recognizing your attachment style can offer crucial insight into why a particular love language feels safe or unsafe, or possibly how to better communicate your emotional needs. Also, how to understand and interpret your partner's or friend's love language more compassionately. We believe that by combining these frameworks, individuals and couples can identify emotional needs with greater clarity, which may reduce misunderstandings around affection and distance. It may also build healthier, more responsive, and communicative relationships.
Let's explore aspects of physical grief and attachment. Grief isn't just emotional, it's deeply physical. And how you attach can influence how you carry loss in your body. Secure folks might feel drained but capable. Anxious types might feel like grief is eating them alive. Tight chest, stomach pain, heart palpitations. Avoidance? Their necks could host a boulder stacking competition. Disorganized? Imagine your body as both the alarm system and the intruder. Our attachments shape our grief response, coping mechanisms, and the stories we tell ourselves about loss. Did we deserve it? Could we have prevented it? Are we still lovable?
Grief isn't one size fits all. It's more like one size fits none, but we try anyway. Margaret Strobe and Hank Schutt created the dual process model to highlight the natural switching between two states of being during the grieving experience. This model shows the dynamic back and forth movement between loss-oriented and restoration-oriented responses. It can help us to recognize and normalize the often messy and non-linear process of grief. Our grief may move between these states within seconds, minutes, days, weeks. We rarely remain in the same state long.
So, understanding your attachment style and love language in grief doesn't make the pain disappear, but it can help you meet yourself with compassion, knowing that you are not crazy, you're not weak, you're not broken. Simply put, you're just grieving with a nervous system that's trying to protect you in its own weird, often inconvenient way.
Okay, so let's talk about the weight of physical grief. So we are going to get right into it. I think it is important and highly valuable to talk and normalize the weight of physical grief in the body. Not only does it wreak havoc on the person, but it also has a grief component that has people mourning the loss of the life they could have had and lost, or what expectations are to come with these massive changes. You know how people say, grief lives in the body? Well, they're not wrong. Additionally, the physical manifestations of hormonal imbalances and turmoil, to anxiety-induced stomach aches and headaches, our bodies grieve in ways that modern medicine is just starting to take seriously.
Did you know that studies show prolonged stress and grief can literally rewire your nervous system? Yeah, fun times. Latent generational trauma is proof of that. And don't even get me started on the stigmas. Women going through menopause or menstrual cycles? Often society dismisses and attributes these physical body fluctuations as moody instead of, dealing with major internal hormonal chaos and dysregulation.
And people with chronic pain, in today's society, are told it's all in their heads. With a shortage of doctors with a proper bedside manner in cases of mental health struggles, we fall by the wayside. The standard of care is almost non-existent, along with programs and facilities to properly care for those experiencing such massive setbacks and help. Mental health is the ultimate invisible battle. So let's take the time to talk about it today. I have a guest who is willing to aid us in a deep dive into their circumstances and how they navigate them in today's system. So let's jump right into the interview with our courageous contributor.
Yes, great idea. I'm joined by a special guest contributor, someone who knows firsthand what it's like to navigate physical grief in a world that often prefers to pretend it doesn't exist. Welcome, and thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you. When you reached out, I hesitated. I really wasn't sure that what I had to say was all that special or important. Once you started to ask the questions, though, I really had to do some reflection. I have lived with this internal battle for so long that I consider it normal and just assume that people don't care or do not care to know more about someone who is struggling in life and society with a diagnosed mental health issue. It dawned on me that is probably why I should talk about it more. So, here I am.
Well, I thank you for having the courage and bravery to talk about the things we shy away from. Share only what you feel comfortable, take breaks and pauses as you need, and remember your anonymity is solidly intact here. Perhaps you could start with some intimate details of your life story. What has been your experience with physical grief, and how has it impacted your day-to-day life?
Thank you, Andie. That means a lot to be given space and a platform to talk about what it is like for me living with an incapacitating and draining illness that most people cannot see. And if they do, they write me off almost immediately. That is always painful on many levels. I do love that you are producing this podcast anonymously. That was one of the reasons I agreed to participate, because now I can talk without judgment. I have to say, the physical grief for me has been this constant undercurrent of exhaustion, pain, and unpredictability. It is entirely confusing too. Like, I regularly go to the doctor, take my medications, and reach out when things are not going well. I feel like I do everything and then some to manage my mental health in order to live well with this diagnosis and working within the confines of these systemic structural walls that were most likely built to keep others away from me so they feel safe, rather than allowing me the freedom to make mistakes and connections with the authentic parts of who I am in this world. Like, I am always hiding or masking so others feel better while I feel like I am doing something wrong all the time. Having a lifelong mental health diagnosis means my body often bears the weight of all the internal and external emotions. If I'm being honest, I can't always process in real time, nor can I reach out to certain supports because it is not available with compassion, empathy, and understanding. So much tension in my life leads to other symptoms like headaches, immense and considerable lasting muscle and body pain, along with debilitating gut issues. It honestly messes with every day, sometimes more so than the diagnosis. Sometimes it feels like this is part of the side effects that my body is carrying that I can't reconcile. I often wonder what I did to deserve this.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That is powerful. You are not the only one experiencing this either, which makes talking about it important. It sounds like you are saying that your body has become a historian, archiving every tough moment in muscle knots and fatigue from the diagnosis. Am I right? And let's be honest, no one gives you a manual on how to live your best life, feeling the way you do, and more stuff piling up as you go. So, what do you feel have been some of the biggest challenges in navigating your diagnosis and the lingering side effects, both personally and in how society perceives it?
Where do I even begin? Stigma is a cold, hard beast. I feel like my experience, if you talk about it, you're an attention seeker, or trying to use your diagnosis and experiences as a get out of jail free card. Depends on the crowd, circumstances, and emotions at the time. I also strongly believe that if you don't talk about your personal lived experiences and your diagnosis, then you're not trying hard enough to get better, or you are trying to stay stuck living off the backs of governmental support and benefits. I feel like society is saying, you are lazy. If only you knew how little the government pays and how hard it is to function each day, as if nothing is impairing me. I have no or limited adult interactions. I want to work and I really want to connect with people, but once they hear about my diagnosis, they back away entirely. Also, when I feel unstable and I need support or help, everyone disappears completely. Proof gone. The first question they ask me is always, "Did you take your meds?" Which drives me bonkers. Yes, I took my meds and I am still in need of support because basically I am not masking well in this moment. I then start to feel the emotional dysregulation sprout up heavily and more rapidly. I guess when I ask for help, it means that it comes with judgments and a certain amount of scrutiny. I really just feel like I am being shamed for feeling like I should have looked at the checklist and seen that this comes down to simply poor timing, and if I could postpone or reschedule this dysregulation for a better time, it would be advisable. Like, of course, I took my medications. I take them every day. I also think that people believe that medications are there to cure, eradicate, and rid the recipient of their diagnosis. These medications do not do that. It is not an antibiotic. Then add on the physical side effects. It's like some days my body just won't cooperate. Simple things, showering, making meals, taking care of my children, feel monumental. But explaining that to people who don't experience it, that's another layer of sheer exhaustion on all levels.
Ugh, yes. The whole invisible illness paradox. If people can't see it, they assume it's not real. As if suffering needs a neon sign to be valid, right? It's infuriating. How do you personally push back against that narrative?
I've had to learn a new language for my own needs and how I express it in general. I have to figure out who and what to share to still remain safe. I also really want to normalize talking about my diagnosis without stigmas and negative outcomes, or have people know that my diagnosis does not define me. I make mistakes that are mine to own, the person owning it, not the diagnosis's fault. I am learning how to say no without guilt, allowing myself rest in moments of escalation, and accepting that I don't owe anyone an explanation for my limitations. If we lived in a world that had more inclusivity and acceptance, I think my existence in the world would be much easier to navigate. I could call someone one out respectfully and help educate pleasant human interactions. That would make my life much better for sure. Ultimately, seeking out spaces, whether online or in real life, where I don't have to justify my experience and still gain validation for being who I am, diagnosis or no diagnosis. That would be huge. I am hopeful things will turn around soon, so we can be more accepting and giving with help and support.
You are saying what I believe a lot of people are feeling, especially if you are living with a diagnosis that should be there to help you get access to services, programs, and aid. It seems as though when we adopt a stigma approach, we have to contend with the diagnosis and not the person themselves. I do believe that boundaries are a superpower, honestly. So, share with me and the listeners, if someone listening right now is struggling with physical grief tied to their mental health, what's something you'd want them to hear?
Well, first, I think I would tell them your experience is valid even if no one else understands it. Your body is not betraying you, it's communicating with you. We are all unique beings with unique life circumstances, and I am here to listen and support you. But mostly, you deserve love and support, even if you have to advocate for it. You are not a burden, period.
Well said. What do you think is one step, big or small, that can make a huge difference in someone's life who has a diagnosis like yours? From the supportive stance of a family member, friend, coworker, government official, your boss, etc.
Oh, that's such a layered question, and honestly, the answer shifts depending on who you're asking. Support looks different coming from a friend versus a boss versus, say, the government. But if I had to boil it down to one step that could make a huge difference, belief. Just believing us when we say we're struggling, when we say we need accommodations, when we say that this is real. That belief is the foundation for everything else. compassion, action, change. If I had to dive more into it, I'd say that from a family member or friend, my advice for change is to listen without trying to fix. That's a big one. When I say, I'm having a really rough day, I don't need a 10-point plan on how to turn it around or what silver linings I should be adopting in this very moment to turn the corner. I need to feel like I'm not alone in it. Sometimes, that sounds really hard. Do you want company or space? Is the most supportive thing someone can say. I think that from a coworker or boss, my advice would be to adopt flexibility. If someone's open about their diagnosis, let them work in a way that doesn't force them to pretend to be okay. Hybrid work, quiet spaces, breaks, mental health days, those things aren't perks. They're lifelines. And if they aren't open about their diagnosis, assume that someone in the office is dealing with something unseen and build a workplace that's compassionate by default. From the stance of our government officials, I would say that mental health parity in healthcare is essential, meaning that mental health care should be treated with the same urgency and coverage as physical health care. No more months-long wait lists, no more impossible insurance loopholes. Also, livable wages and housing security, because stressors like financial instability make mental illness 10 times harder to manage. If we actually prioritized mental health systemically, we wouldn't just be treating crises, we'd be preventing them. From the lens of society as a whole, we need a whole lot fewer judgments. We need to move away from these extremes where people with mental health conditions and diagnoses are either seen as inspirational warriors or dangerous and unstable. Real people exist in between. And collectively, we are parents, workers, students, partners, friends. We deserve to be seen as whole people, not just our diagnoses. The biggest overall takeaway is if you don't know what to do, start by believing us and practicing empathy over all else. The rest flows from there, because even if we can't articulate or focus, at least we know that you sat with us in moments of discomfort and pain, whether you know what the right thing to do or say is.
Beautifully said. There's so much stigma attached to people's experiences. What has helped you cope, both physically and mentally? Any resources or practices that made a difference in your life that you could offer to others?
Oh wow, that's a big one. Coping for me has been this ongoing experiment, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and what kind of works, but only on Tuesdays, when the moon is in a good mood. There's no one size fits all, and that was a hard realization. I spent years chasing the perfect solution, the one magic thing that would fix everything. But the truth? Coping is a collection of small things layered over time that create a livable rhythm. To continue, in the physical sense, my body and mind are in a lifelong relationship, and sometimes, but they're not always speaking to each other in words that are understood by one or both. My diagnosis makes me hyper aware of how my emotions manifest into physical, so learning to work with my body instead of fighting against it has been colossal. Some of the things that have helped me include 1. Movement without punishment. Exercise used to feel like another chore I was failing at, but when I reframed it as movement that feels good for me, then everything changed. Sometimes it's a slow stretch in bed, sometimes it's a walk, and sometimes it's just unclenching my jaw and relaxing my shoulders, which is a chore in itself. 2. Regulating my nervous system. I used to think self-care meant face masks and bubble baths, but I realized it means actively doing breathing exercises, grounding techniques, and learning to recognize when I'm in fight or flight mode, which feels like I am all the time. Sometimes I use cold water on my wrists, humming to activate my vagus nerve, tapping or box breathing. These small things help me pull myself out of spirals. They do not get rid of the feelings, but they do help me access parts of me that can get through this instead of completely shutting down. Lastly, but most importantly, sleep, hydration, and food that doesn't stress me out are essential. I can't fix my brain if my body is running on empty. I don't follow any rigid diet plans or routines, but I've learned that skipping meals or running on caffeine makes everything way worse. And sleep? non-negotiable. Even if my brain is an overactive mess at night, I at least give myself the space to rest without technology and planned bedtimes.
Sounds like you've got the physical coping strategies in proper working order. Great work. What do you do for mental coping strategies?
This one is much trickier because mental health is like a moving target. Some days the tools work, other days my brain laughs in their face. But these things have honestly been a game changer for me. I firmly believe in therapy though. This has taken some time to navigate, and I've learned that I have a few different therapists for my varying needs. Not every therapist is a good fit, so keep looking until you find the right fit. Finding someone who understands me, my condition, not just in theory but in practice, was really life-changing. Also, I do take my medication without shame now. For the longest time, I felt like taking meds meant I was failing at handling my mental health. But honestly, the right medication gave me enough stability to use with all the other coping tools. My thought process now is it's not a crutch, it's a bridge. Mindset is important. And I do like to connect with my community even when I don't feel particularly social. Those are the moments I feel I need it most. This is something I have to actually push to the forefront, or I will remove myself completely, which is not good for my mental health and well-being. Isolation is dangerous. I don't always have the energy or finances to go out, but I realize that having even one person I can text when I'm struggling has made all the difference in the world. Who knew? If I had to sum it up, the biggest thing that's really helped me cope is giving myself permission. Permission to rest, permission to not have all the answers, permission to be a work in progress, permission to love. Because I see that healing isn't a finish line. I just need to find ways to keep going even when I don't want to.
Yes, totally. Nearly 80% of people living with chronic mental health conditions report experiencing physical symptoms that most doctors never connect to their diagnosis. So, exploring this hidden intersection of mental and physical health in the interview today with you is fascinating because it affects millions but rarely gets discussed. How are we not talking about it?
I don't disagree. It is such a massive topic and conversation that needs to be addressed openly. That statistic really puts things in perspective, though, especially the way my body is a historian, archiving every difficult moment in muscle knots, stress, and fatigue. It's such a vivid illustration of how this all connects.
Yes, and further to that, it is fascinating how the medical community is only now starting to understand these connections. I just found out that chronic stress from mental health conditions can alter our DNA expression and immune responses. So, like how you described having to mask your struggles while dealing with debilitating physical symptoms and side effects. It's like running a marathon while pretending you're just taking a casual stroll, highly counterproductive and mostly unrecognized. Research shows that people with severe mental health conditions die 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population, largely due to untreated physical health issues.
Well, that's absolutely devastating, and it ties directly into what I was saying about healthcare disparities and the challenge of getting good, comprehensive care.
Yes, speaking of healthcare, let's talk about those wait times and lack of doctor availability that you mentioned. I looked up that the average wait for a mental health specialist in most major cities is now over 3 months, and that's if you can afford it. So basically, during that waiting period, both mental and physical symptoms often worsen, creating this devastating cycle. How do you feel people manage to cope without services, especially in the immediate care realm, where it could severely impact the lives around us, causing devastating results?
Well, I can't say what others would do, but we are definitely in a major crisis. I would guess that their approach to coping strategies differs from country to country and province to province. I have had my fair share of struggles in the system, in almost every facet.
It reminds me that one thing someone could do for themselves, potentially while they wait, is movement therapy, if possible. And as good as movement is for the body, it is better to integrate other modalities and healthcare professionals for best practices. It is like you mentioned earlier, that reframing exercise, the movement without punishment. I would assume that some people can find great benefit from exercise and the outdoors in the meantime. Studies do show that gentle movement can reduce inflammation markers by up to 30%, which is somewhat helpful while you wait, I suppose. It does not help those struggling to move or find the safest ways to do so, since services and professionals are largely unavailable when needed. Further to that, I also liked the way you mentioned learning more about internal regulation, recognizing fight or flight responses, and how you showed some of the complexities of managing these conditions. It's not just about willpower.
Yeah, definitely. I read that when someone's in that fight or flight state, their prefrontal cortex actually shows reduced activity, making it physically harder to make decisions or regulate emotions. I guess that explains why it is emphasized the importance of having support systems in place before reaching critical crisis points. I totally get it now after being put through it all.
I can see that. Many studies show that social isolation can increase inflammation markers as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So, when it is talked about pushing themselves to maintain connections, that is why, because it is literally a life-saving behavior. The stigma piece really compounds mental health issues. It is reported that many people back away after learning about a diagnosis because of the stigmas, both internally and externally. That kind of rejection actually triggers the same brain regions as physical pain, which hinders forward progress. Did you know that research shows that chronic stress from stigma and discrimination can actually change how our genes express themselves, affecting everything from immune function to pain perception?
I guess that is exactly why support points are so important, like workplace accommodations, and why they are considered lifelines rather than perks is so crucial.
Well, the data does back this up. Companies with strong mental health support programs see up to $4 return for every dollar invested through increased productivity and reduced turnover. So, in essence, if we look at the bigger picture, supporting mental health isn't just compassionate, it's economically smart. I know earlier you mentioned medication being a bridge rather than a crutch. It reminded me that medication, as prescribed treatment plan, can provide the stability needed for other interventions to work effectively.
Yes, my medication, whether I want to take it or not, has been really helpful. I had a hard time at first with my diagnosis, then the medication types and doses were a hurdle, but now it is just the way it needs to be so that I can do my activities of daily living without so many roadblocks and debilitating circumstances surrounding me. That is why I became dedicated to giving myself the best chance I could with what I have. This is me living the best life I can under my circumstances. I had to learn a new language for my new needs. Adaptation is required to navigate my life challenges. I can't ignore them anymore, or I end up in a worse position.
That is a remarkable way to look at it. Neuroscience shows that this kind of adaptive behavior creates new neural pathways. We're literally rewiring our brains when we learn new coping strategies. That brings hope to many struggling by being open about healing as an ongoing process rather than reaching a finish line. Looking ahead, what do you think are the most crucial changes needed in how we approach mental health and its physical manifestations?
Good question. The short answer is I have no idea, as this is, for many, is a solo journey with unique diagnostic information, supports, resources, help, acceptance, etc. The long answer, though, is reframing and applying an emphasis on destigmatizing personal and professional beliefs and values, replacing core fundamental foundations with acceptance, kindness, supportive societies, organizations, associations, transitions, life skill building, etc. for everyone and everything surrounding mental health and well-being. Using education at an early stage or any stage is better than no education at all. The research shows that perceived social support is a stronger predictor of outcomes than the actual support received.
Let's hope that we, as a community and broader society, can do better than perceived positions and wholeheartedly embrace the actual support, so people have the care and funding without question before it hits a critical point for them or the community that surrounds them. I do see your point, though. It is better to think it is there as a lifeline rather than know it does not exist at all. And as we wrap up, I keep coming back to hope for a more inclusive and accepting world. I know the data shows that societies with stronger social support systems have better mental health outcomes across the board. Where do you land on hope in your current position?
Well, I will always hold space for hope. You never know. I do think we need a lot of change, and with the way our unhoused, unemployed, disabled, mental health cuts, social supports, and healthcare system, etc., is going, we probably need hope more than ever. Big changes happen when key supports are not working out. Talking about mental health and the physical grief that has come with it has made this conversation so very important. Showing how personal experiences align with scientific research to paint a clear picture of what needs to change is essential. That is why I choose to participate today.
I'm obsessed with your honesty. You just gave people a roadmap wrapped in reality. Thank you so much for your vulnerability, humor, and wisdom. You're proof that healing is nonlinear, and sometimes the most radical thing we can do is just keep going. And maybe also that's one of the key takeaways. Change happens when we bridge the gap between lived experience and scientific understanding, creating space for both in our understanding of mental health. Arms wide open to receive information in all capacities. If I could, I'd just wrap this whole conversation in a warm blanket and deliver it to every person who's ever felt unseen in their mental health and grief struggle. Thank you for sharing your truth and story with us.
No, thank you for allowing me to share.
All right, so in regular fashion, my grief comrade and I are going to shift to two scenarios in the physical grief arena. This time is a little different. In scenario 1, the anatomy of grief in the body, we are going to address the grief that comes with menopause instead of providing a case study.
Yes, menopause isn't just a hormonal shift, it's a full body experience, often laced with a silent, unspoken grief. A grief for youth, for energy, for the body that once felt familiar but now feels foreign. It's a transition that can bring deep emotional and physical challenges, yet society rarely acknowledges the weight of this transformation. Today, we're diving into the anatomy of grief in menopause, how it manifests physically and mentally, and, most importantly, how we can support those going through it.
We are now going to go over how grief shows up in the body during menopause. 1. Cortisol overload and nervous system. Dysregulation. Increased stress hormones can make the body feel like it's constantly on high alert, leading to fatigue, anxiety, and insomnia. 2. Muscle and joint pain. Estrogen plays a role in keeping inflammation at bay. When it declines, aches and pains can skyrocket. Many women feel like they've aged decades overnight. 3. Brain fog and cognitive changes. Forgetting words mid-sentence, losing focus, struggling with memory. These cognitive shifts can feel like a personal betrayal. 4. Emotional roller coaster. Mood swings, irritability, and heightened anxiety can make day-to-day life feel unpredictable, sometimes leading to deep depression or emotional numbness.
Similarly, many women do describe feeling invisible in their careers, relationships, even in medical spaces where their symptoms are brushed off as just part of the aging process. Increased risk of depression and anxiety is often overlooked and is due to hormonal shifts. Yet, because menopause isn't often seen as a mental health crisis, many don't receive the care they need. There are significant amounts of grief for the person experiencing menopause. They grieve the person that they once were. This loss of identity, sexuality, and confidence can accompany the physical changes of menopause.
There are many things that one can do to support with grace and dignity those who are experiencing perimenopause and menopause. 1. Medical advocacy, encouraging women to seek out specialists who take menopause seriously, whether through hormone therapy, lifestyle changes, or mental health support. It helps tremendously. 2. Create a workplace and social understanding, menopause-friendly workplace policies, flexible hours, mental health days, and accommodations for brain fog or fatigue. 3. Construct and design community and connection. creating spaces, whether online or in person, where women can share their experiences without shame or stigma. 4. Practice self-compassion and grace, recognizing that menopause isn't a decline but a transformation, encouraging women to grieve the changes while also embracing new ways of living, finding joy in what their bodies can do rather than what they've lost.
The bottom line is, we need to affirm those around us that they are not broken. It is important to remind ourselves and others that you as a person are evolving. This transition is not a loss, it's a rebirth into a new version of yourself. One that deserves care, rest, and radical self-love. Meet and love yourself and others where they are at. This is a process, a journey, and there is privilege in achieving this in life.
We are now going to go through Scenario 2, The Body Remembers, Trauma, Mental Health, and Physical Grief. In this scenario, we'll outline that grief isn't just an emotional experience, it's a physical one. Trauma, anxiety, depression, and prolonged stress all leave their fingerprints on the body, reshaping how we move, breathe, and exist. Today, in this scenario acknowledgement, we're exploring the deep connection between mental health and physical grief, why the body holds on to past pain, and how we can begin to release it with grace and support.
We are now looking at grief and trauma and how it manifests in the body. Tightness in the chest and shallow breathing, the body's way of preparing for danger even when the threat is long gone. Gut issues, IBS, nausea, stomach pain. The gut-brain connection means unresolved grief can show up as digestive distress. Chronic pain and tension. The nervous system gets stuck in fight or flight mode, constant fight or flight activation, leading to migraines, back pain, and muscle stiffness. Fatigue and autoimmune flares. Unprocessed trauma can lead to inflammation, impacting the immune system and making conditions like fibromyalgia or lupus worse. When the body is carrying years of stress, loss, and trauma, it starts shutting down in ways that aren't always recognized as grief. Anxiety becomes restlessness, depression becomes exhaustion, PTSD becomes chronic pain.
Many people feel betrayed by their own bodies, frustrated that they can't just get over it. But the body doesn't forget. It holds the past until we find a way to process and release it. People may consider holistic healing approaches, therapy combined with body-based healing like somatic therapy, breath work, or even gentle movement, yoga, tai chi, walking, psychedelic psychotherapies, introducing trauma-informed medical care, encouraging doctors and mental health professionals to look at the whole person, not just symptoms. Incorporating workplace and family awareness, understanding that someone struggling with mental health isn't lazy or unmotivated. They're carrying an invisible weight that affects their entire being. Actively encouraging rest without guilt, teaching people that rest is productive, that slowing down is sometimes the most healing thing they can do. Normalize support and make space for those experiencing mental health issues and physical grief.
All right, so here are some cold, hard Canadian stats, because numbers don't sugarcoat. Nearly 80% of women in menopause report symptoms that interfere with daily life, yet far too few get adequate medical care or validation. Chronic illness, over 40% of Canadians aged 20 and older live with at least one chronic condition, and still, medical gaslighting persists like it's part of the treatment plan. Mental health? 1 in 5 Canadians experiences a mental health issue each year, and yes, the stigma is still kicking around like it's 1995. But here's the real talk. Naming the toll of physical grief doesn't make you fragile, it makes you informed, and informed, that's strength and power, my friends.
In Canada, 1 in 4 people aged 15 and older, that's over 7.5 million people, report having a mental health condition that limits their daily life or work. And yet, we still treat mental illness like a character flaw instead of what it really is, a full-blown public health crisis. The source? Statistics, Canada, 2023 Mental Health and Access to Care Survey.
The way our guests described their daily battle really brought those numbers to life. That constant push-pull between desperately needing support and constantly navigating stigma, that's the tightrope so many people are walking every single day.
And the description of how mental health shows up in the body discussed in the interview. The idea of the body as a historian, archiving grief, trauma, and anxiety through chronic pain, tension, and gut issues, is something we rarely talk about in clinical settings, but it's incredibly real and very common.
And sadly, those physical symptoms are often brushed aside. Research shows that in Canada, people with mental illness wait 4 to 7 years on average for a proper diagnosis, and that's if they even access care in the first place. The source, Canadian Mental Health Association, CMHA, 2022.
That delay really puts our guest's story in context, especially that soul-crushing question, "Did you take your meds?" As if meds are some kind of magic bean that instantly solves everything.
Well, the truth is, most psychiatric medications take 4 to 6 weeks to start working, and that's assuming you're one of the lucky 30% who find the right one on the first try. For everyone else, it's trial and error, plus side effects, dosage adjustments, cost, benefits often brings a lot of emotional fallout. The source, Canadian Pharmacists Association, CAMH, 2021.
Another moment that really stuck with me was their experience of being trapped in this impossible double bind. If they speak openly, they're dramatic. If they stay silent, they're not doing enough to get better.
That lines up with Canadian data too. Over 50% of employees report feeling uncomfortable talking about their mental health at work, and nearly 70% fear professional consequences if they disclose. The source, Mental Health Commission of Canada, 2023.
I really like the idea of bringing things like hybrid options, like quiet spaces, and dedicated mental health days to the people, because they aren't luxuries for those with debilitating mental health issues and concerns. These hybrid options are smart, evidence-based tools to boost productivity and well-being. Again, the economic side is just as compelling. Mental health issues cost the Canadian economy over $50 billion each year due to lost productivity, absenteeism, and disability claims. Our source? Deloitte Canada, 2023.
Some coping strategies? The way our guest reframed movement as exercise without punishment and described medication as not a crutch but a bridge. That's the kind of mental shift that changes lives. And it's not just poetic, it's backed by science. Neuroscience research shows that cognitive reframing actually changes the way the brain processes stress and emotion. Our source, University of British Columbia, Neuroscience of Emotion Lab, 2022.
The conversation and emphasis on nervous system regulation that they mentioned, that's not just trendy wellness talk. Techniques like cold exposure, diaphragmatic breathing, and vagus nerve stimulation are all supported by research as ways to reduce cortisol and regulate the fight or flight response. Our backed source? McMaster University, Integrative Neuroscience Lab, 2021.
What drove it home for me was their point about isolation. In Canada, loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26 to 32%, which is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Our source, Angus Reid Institute and CMHA, 2023. That's why their message about staying connected, even when everything inside you wants to shut down, is so powerful. They're not just fighting a diagnosis, they're actively resisting a society that tells them to disappear.
And that brings us to the system itself. Even when people do seek help, mental health services in Canada are 5 times more likely to be out of pocket or unavailable compared to physical health services, even with provincial health coverage. Our reliable source, you ask? Canadian Institute for Health Information, CIHI, 2022. So how can we expect people to cope, let alone heal, when the system is built with roadblocks at every turn?
There was emphasis on belief. Just believing someone when they say they're struggling is so vital. Validation isn't just comforting, it literally helps regulate the nervous system and reduce symptom severity. Our source, Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH, 2022. When our special guest contributor talked about masking their struggles to make others feel comfortable, that's the invisible labor no one sees, but so many live every single day. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about symptoms. It's about navigating a world that constantly underestimates how hard you're working to stay afloat. That's why sharing their story today really matters. It's raw, it's brave, and it pushes the conversation forward. We need more of these stories, because change doesn't start in policy, it starts in understanding.
That's if we're really serious as a collective about mental health. We need to stop expecting individuals to carry the burden of broken systems and start building a society that actually supports the full human experience. So this portion is devoted to resources and support for our grief survivors.
And let's be real, navigating grief through the lens of love and attachment is like trying to assemble IKEA furniture with no instructions and one emotional Allen key. But fear not. Canada's got some gems to help you make sense of it all. The tried and true, and now for your grief toolbox, Canada edition, therapy and counseling. From private practice to community health centers, there are licensed therapists across the country trained in grief, trauma, attachment, and chronic illness. Think cognitive behavioral therapy, somatic therapy, EMDR, narrative therapy. Some provinces even offer free or sliding scale mental health services through provincial programs or nonprofits organizations.
Another mini toolbox treatment suggestion is mind-body care in movement and meditation. Grief lives in the body, so give it space to move. Try trauma-informed yoga, check out local YWCA or grief-specific classes, walking therapy, or guided meditation apps made in Canada like Calm in the Storm or Mind Beacon.
We've got more for you to add to your toolbox, storytelling, and support groups. You don't have to grieve in isolation. Organizations like the Canadian Virtual Hospice, Bereaved Families, and Moms Stop the Harm offer peer groups, online forums, and culturally relevant support for diverse communities.
And for our New Age digital lifelines, we have tools like Wellness Together Canada and Talk Suicide Canada, offer 24/7 support and resources for when the weight of it all gets too heavy to carry solo. There are grief groups and podcasts like this one, Grief Anatomy and Grief Stories, Canada, www.griefstories.org. Also, if you are struggling to find out what your love languages are, please visit Love Languages Quiz, Dr. Gary Chapman, www.5lovelanguages.com, quizzes.
In The Body Keeps the Grief, you'll remember we unpacked the science and soul of embodied trauma and grief stored in the nervous system that shows up in the body. It is an homage, and Inspired by the Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, so recommending his book is essential and a must-read.
Our regular programming now directs us to affirmations and mantra spaces for exploring grief, love, and attachment outside heteronormative or binary frameworks. That affirmation is that your body is not the enemy. It is speaking to you in the only language it knows. You are allowed to rest, to heal, and to move forward at your own pace. Another wonderful affirmation by Dominique Bertolucci in 100 Days Happier Daily Inspiration for Lifelong Happiness, passage on page 167. Never give up. It seems fitting after today's interview. The passage goes like this. When you first start working towards something you want in life, it can be quite challenging to stick to your goals or plans. If you feel like giving up today, remind yourself that it might not always be easy, but in time, it will come to you with ease. A repeatable mantra, very few changes in life are achieved without effort and a commitment to making that effort. I hope that gives you peace and comfort as you move forward. Please remember to also be kind and patient towards yourself and others as you navigate this questionable time. And that's a beautiful wrap. Another deep dive into the weird, messy, and totally unscripted journey of being human while experiencing the many facets of grief. If today made you laugh, cry, or stare into the abyss for a solid minute, congrats, you're doing it right. We kindly remind you that grief and mental health aren't pop quizzes you can cram for, and there's no gold star for having it all together. Trust me, I checked. But there is something to be said for showing up, for yourself, for your people, and for the conversations that make the heavy stuff a little lighter. We want to thank our guests for being brave and vulnerable while saying the quite stuff out loud. To recap today's Grief Anatomy episode, there's no straight line from pain to peace. You may feel okay one day and shattered the next, even years later. That's normal. Many survivors feel like they're doing grief wrong if they backslide, but grief moves in spirals, not steps. 1. Your grief is valid, even if it doesn't look like anyone else's. Whether you're crying daily or haven't shed a tear, your grief is real. Whether you lost a person, a relationship, a pet, or a version of your life, you get to grieve it. 2. Remember that the body keeps the score. Grief often shows up physically: fatigue, brain fog, digestive issues, chronic pain, tension. This is a biological response to emotional trauma. Understanding the physical side of grief reduces self-blame and promotes gentler self-care. 3. You need coping tools, not just time. While time doesn't heal everything, but tools can help. Therapy, movement, creativity, rest, rituals, support groups, and medication are all valid. Actively engaging with your grief gives you agency. Passive waiting can deepen hopelessness. 4. Connection is a form of medicine. Grief isolates, but humans are wired for connection. Even one safe person can help reduce the mental and physical toll. Loneliness significantly increases mental and physical health risks. Grief support can literally be life-saving. 5. Make sure that your body and mind know that it's okay to rebuild slowly and differently. You're not going back to who you were. You're growing around the loss, becoming someone new. That's not betrayal, that's transformation. Permission to evolve frees people from guilt over healing. 6. Ambivalence is part of the grief process. You can love and miss someone and also feel angry, hurt, or relieved. All those feelings can coexist. Many grief survivors carry shame for having inappropriate emotions, but complexity is part of grief's truth. 7. Healing isn't erasing, it's integrating. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means making space in your life for both the love and the loss. Survivors often resist healing because they fear it dishonors their person. Reframing helps them move forward with grief, not away from it. 8. You deserve support, even if you're functioning. Just because you're going to work or caring for others doesn't mean you're not suffering. High-functioning grief can go unnoticed and untreated. People often need permission to seek help. And finally, grief can crack you open, but also help you grow. Post-traumatic growth is possible. Some people find deeper meaning, new purpose, or richer empathy through loss. Meet yourself or people where they are at in their grief journey while being kind, respectful, and patient. I'm Andie, your guide through the emotional jungle. If this episode spoke to you, send it to someone who gets it. And if it didn't, well, send it to your most emotionally unavailable friend as a challenge. Until next time, be kind, be weird, and if all else fails, hydrate, damn it. Later, grief explorers.